explain something to you guys that happened yesterday. And it's happening a lot, and it happens often. On this particular case, our knowledge of contracts and our lack of knowledge of contracts would have been a blessing in disguise. Did you guys read here the text message between Elizabeth and the other agent?
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me what David doesn't know. All right, so let me do a quick recap. Elizabeth sends a message to an agent to verify that the acceptance of the offer was accepted. When she was about to get the offer accepted, they had an issue that arose, and the issue was closing cost credit. They did a negotiation of closing cost credit via a text message. Does that make any sense to you guys? They did a negotiation, okay? So let me take 10 steps back just so that you guys have a clear understanding. Elizabeth takes a buyer that was generated by the company, and this buyer fell in love with a home. The buyer submits an offer at $425,000, and in that offer, Elizabeth requests $5,000 for recurring and non-recurring closing costs. In that offer, there was a counteroffer that I didn't print for you guys, and in that counteroffer, those $5,000 were not mentioned at all. Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
The listing agent forgot to put on the counteroffer, hey, those $5,000 you requested, they don't apply. So let me just get more into detail. And if you're not understanding, don't worry. You'll eventually, your subconscious mind will eventually be like, this is what Jesse was talking about the other day in relation to this contract, because it happens more. And I'm so excited about it because I panicked about it when it happened, and then I read into the contracts, and when I read the contracts, I'm like, we win, checkmate. And I'll explain to you guys why, okay? No, I just want you guys to know, because this is the marketplace that you guys are in, where people are such bad agents that you're like, man, that customer, if I would have taken a different approach, that customer would have lost $5,000. So it's important for you guys to be on top of it. And then I'll bring up another scenario of lack of attention by another party. Remember we talked about how many people are involved in these transactions?
Yeah.
Way too many, right? And all of them suck, myself included. You know why? Because we always assume that he has it, he's doing it. Do you understand why I push so much follow-up? Because these are the issues that arise. So we were at the closing table. In the closing table, our buyer signs his closing documents, and in those closing documents, the $5,000 credit shows up. Seller has to sign a document saying, this is the final figures, I'm accepting everything. In those final figures, the $5,000 came up, and the seller was like, nope, I'm not gonna give them $5,000. So would you believe that that agent thought that the negotiation of those $5,000 was enough on this text message? So let me tell you how interesting it gets. Now get the addendum number 2. Number 1, I looked at this addendum and I'm like, she didn't date this addendum. So I was already mad about that, because I'm like, you need to be checking your contracts, and your contract should be dated.
Was this Elizabeth on this one?
No, that was the listing agent. Yeah. Elizabeth was nice enough to Elizabeth accepted, like, hey, you're saying no closing costs on this text message. Okay, let's move forward with that. I just want to teach you guys that you cannot negotiate contracts via text message or email. That is just, or verbal. That is a binding agreement between you and the agent. Remember, you guys are not the shot callers. Yeah, you are, but not in this type of case. You're only providing information to the buyer and to the seller. So look how interesting it gets. Elizabeth starts to go through these text messages. They have a very clear understanding. And she says, are my clients still getting $5,000 credit for closing? No, they won't, because they haven't read the counteroffers, I'm guessing. Would you believe that she didn't write that down in her counteroffer? So then when she panicked, she provided this addendum. Read the addendum now.
For clarification purpose, there has never been, and there will never be, a seller credit towards closing costs of $5,000.
So this is executed by who?
Seller.
And it's not executed by who?
The buyer.
So is this a binding agreement?
No.
Do you understand why it is so important to continuously read these contracts?
And there's no contract date of the purchase agreement.
There's
so
nothing
it
on here.
Gives you no time.
And for the sake of knowledge, I even found another mistake, and this is what I wanted to tell, and I'm going to tell Elizabeth, but I'm telling you guys, when there's a counter offer, and in that counter offer, your seller sent the counter offer, and your buyer accepted, it is still not a binding agreement until the seller signs the confirmation of acceptance. But this agent had no knowledge of what's going on. This is why I tell people, read the contracts every single day. And I can't say it enough, because this, if I told Elizabeth, I said, what approach do you want to take? Because I can get you the $5,000 just based on this. And she says, well, I kind of committed to this, and this is where we're at, but I'm like, this doesn't count. So the point of the story today is stop negotiating your contracts. And in our case, look, in Elizabeth, she did everything right, because this is the way to really, really get your client something that the other agent, and I do it all the time, and I'm sorry, I probably should say sorry to God, I probably shouldn't do this, but I do this all the time. In my contracts, I will always try to find something that I know the other agent's not paying attention to. Tell me why this agent didn't pay attention to the $5,000 credit. Can somebody use the book as reference? No. She's not using her infinite intelligence. She's not really, really putting things together and processing it in her billions of little things that are inside our brain. Yes, David.
I'm curious. I mean, since this is not a valid way of canceling that 5,000 that they already agreed upon, what can the seller do other than, I mean, are they even able to cancel it if they don't want to pay that 5,000?
No, they're already in a binding agreement.
What happens if, like, they just say, never mind, we're not selling
The agent had to bite it.
Yeah, well, the agent automatically would have to bite it if they're not in agreement. But if the seller cancels due to this after all the contingency periods, the seller is responsible for paying our commissions, number one, which is the most important for you guys. That's why I'm telling you, this is so important, because if and Elizabeth did the right thing, right? But let's just say the seller would have been like, nope, we're canceling everything. We don't want to do this. Let's just say the buyer would have been like, I need those $5,000. To my surprise, Elizabeth handled the customer so well that the customer was all like, let's not argue with this. Let's not go back and forth. I'll wire the money. Not a big deal. So to me, I'm like, whoa, that's a good thing.
The seller said they'll wire them.
No, the buyer said that. The buyer was all, because see, my approach was like, no, we won this one because we have all the proper documentation. But what this tells me is that the listing agent didn't read through that contract. Does that make any sense? You guys need to be read through the contract. The only thing we didn't do properly, which I'm like, I need to push on that, is the confirmation of acceptance from the seller saying seller really confirms that. At that point, I would have been like, let's fight for those $5,000. But let me ask you guys a question. If you were the buyer, how would you feel about that?
Pretty upset.
You would be upset, right? I would be like, hey, I'm not going to go and give you $4,500 more. Does that make any sense? This is why paying attention to the contracts is so important. And let me take it one step further. Forget about this. So we're in the middle of an escrow, and this escrow is about to close. And there is a huge problem with the preliminary title report. Remember, I went through the whole checklist with you guys, and I've been talking to you guys about preliminary title reports and doing all this bullshit homework that you guys have to do with all these contracts and all that stuff. Well, to my surprise, the escrow officer looked at the preliminary title report. There was a lien on the preliminary title report. Yesterday at 8:49, while I'm doing this, I get a text message, and the escrow officer is saying, I'm sorry, that lien is $100,000. And I'm thinking to myself, like, what are we gonna do now?
It gets better though. You forgot the main detail.
Which one?
It was already funded and
Oh,
recorded.
right. I was gonna get to that. Yeah, the problem is, that wasn't the problem. The problem was not the 100,000. The problem was that the escrow company didn't go and tell the seller, hey, Mr. Seller, $100,000 lien. They just closed the deal out completely. Do you understand how illegal that is?
After the fact.
Yeah. So this is why I tell you guys need to be paying attention to a lot of this stuff, because if the customer wouldn't trust the fact that I've done everything in my power to make sure there's a smooth transaction, Guess who would have got chewed out? Me. So this is why it's so important for you guys to pay attention to these contracts. You guys are the quarterbacks to this deal. You guys are calling the plays every single time. So this is what I want you guys to practice today. If you don't have a residential purchase agreement, tell us today how to print one for you and read it line by line. Guys, I still read the purchase contract all the time just because I want to make sure that if there's a change, because the CAR changes stuff so rapidly that I'm thinking to myself, what if I'm not vigilant and I'm not paying attention and then my client loses that type of money? Guys, I would be upset over 100,000. I would have killed somebody right there. That's what I was telling him. I took them all the way to the escrow office yesterday and I sat there with everybody and I told everybody, here, let's see what's really going on. Yes.
Also, I learned yesterday, and I just wanted to share this because I really share it. But anyways, when it comes to the people that you're doing your service, even though we want to trust them, always verify. We've been told that loan docs were already out and blah, blah, blah. Oh, behold, loan docs haven't even been out yet because we take the word of somebody else. Don't ever put your business in another agent's hands. That's what happened with this though, Canyon. We're like, oh, we're going to fund. Oh, behold, we don't even have loan docs, and how are we going to fund?
Yeah, so this is what I want you guys to do. I want you to print out that RPA, get a copy of it, read it, highlight it, understand it. Because there's so much information. It's only going to make you a better human being to do that. And the reality is we're in a dog-eat-dog world. So you guys have to be very, very aggressive. The three things that I want you guys to learn: residential purchase agreement, residential listing agreement, and then seller counter offers. Does that make any sense to you guys? You guys need to know that the terms cannot be negotiated on a text message, email, phone call. Put that in writing. Send me an email with an addendum and an escrow amendment. Does that make any sense? Print out the RPAs. Guys, you guys are all getting very close to having a massive explosion in production. Remember, it took me 6 months to break through. After 6 months, I just didn't know what happened. I tasted some commission, and all of a sudden it was nonstop for me. You guys need to make sure that happens. The deals are closing, but just imagine. Oh, you're a part of this too. That was yes thing. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you guys win with this. I'm sure you got
all night last night. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So no, but it got done, right?
You got done, yes.
Cool. Yeah. So the point of the story is, you guys need to make sure you guys are using your brain in these transactions. Like, it is very important that your team is on top of everything. Like, I work with too many people every single day that I'm like, damn, this is how you make a living. This is unacceptable. Like, this is really, really bad. And yesterday, that $100,000 loss for the customer could have resulted in a very, very big issue. It might go into a lawsuit. Somebody's going to lose money there, but not me. You know why not me? Because I cross all my T's and I dot all my I's. And do I make mistakes? Yeah, I make mistakes all the time. Mistakes are very, very normal. But the reality is, I'm not going to lose out on an opportunity just because I'm not reading the contracts. So I want you guys to understand that your job is very, very serious. Like, your approach, I know it's like, oh, it's so hard. We got to do all this prospecting. We got to do all that stuff. Prospecting and getting the clients is the easiest part of the transaction. The hardest part is the negotiation of the contracts. So put yourself in this scenario. My neighbor just moved across the street, and I was asking, well, she asked me first, like, what do you do for a living? And I'm like, why do I always have to go through this? Like, I'm a realtor. Like, it's not that shacks. But she, you know what I asked her, so what do you do for a living? She's a contract negotiator for CBS, makes $500,000. Guys, the job of negotiating contracts is a very, very highly paid job, but you have to have the grit to do this stuff and do it in writing and up front. What's the word like here? If we go to a court of law and the seller says no, they agreed to nothing, and you think that they're going to take this text message? No, because we already have California Association of Realtors forms that are specified for the negotiation of these contracts. I'm just trying to tell you guys, because you guys will run into this issue and you're going to come to me and I'm like, let's review the contracts together. And as I reviewed these contracts, we learned that we won.
Also have everything in writing.
And have everything in writing. So anyway, it's already coming on. You guys want to do our affirmations? I'll put some music for us.